Even that's negotiable.
My mic is low.
Yeah, mine doesn't work.
Is
Sarah,
mine?
Sarah doesn't like the song. Who likes the song?
Sip away. Sip away.
Okay, so
Wait.
about
What would make
about
Test.
Greg
4%
Bell.
of you that
what would make you like this song more? What do you think should be added to it? Say again.
Shots
Oh.
fired.
Wait. We need two more things. So first,
do you want me to get a dictionary?
Other things that would make the song. Bikinis. Yeah, British.
Men in bikinis.
Men specifically.
T-Rex is in bikinis.
Okay, guys, it's our panel start time, so maybe let's not talk about theme songs right now.
What if it's a theme song about this panel?
This is not the improv.
Who wrote the theme song for the panel? Not it.
Oh, me.
Yeah.
Congratulations.
Congratulations. Let's start. I love you all.
Aww.
I just met you in person, and I love you.
I know.
You know.
It's a
Sorry, honey.
theater thing. Sorry.
With an ER.
It's the rules.
Mine now.
Ari down here.
Anyway, so I don't forget, I want to remind everybody of our track sponsor for 2024 is Zagat or Zakat. I'm sorry, Zakat.
It's like cigarette, but
For over 22 years, they've been empowering lives through disaster relief, food distribution, and orphan care and more. Their top-notch ratings from Charity Navigator and Airbnb. What?
BBB wise.
Oh,
Better
and
Business Bureau.
somebody put and ANB on this and threw me off. ABBB wise gives alliance means your contributions are going to make a difference. Zagat.org. QR codes on the table to donate online. The DragonCon 2024 charity is the Arthritis Foundation #1 cause of disability. Arthritis affects nearly 60 million adults and hundreds of thousands of children. DragonCon matches up to $125,000. Last year, we raised $272,000 for the 2023 charity. That being said,
If you have physical fiat, there's a can for that.
that's what I was gonna say.
Mhm. Oh, sorry. Apologies.
No. You go ahead. You're better at it than me.
You can put anything in there. Yeah, bonds acceptable.
Beskar.
Yes, keys to your car.
Gold.
All acceptable.
I was gonna
Stamps.
say
Stamps are
Latinum
liquid
works too,
Oh.
but you know.
And it's a write-off.
Kidneys.
Unless it was stolen. Don't write it off if you stole it. That's how they get you.
Mhm.
If I could find my notes for this panel, that would be wonderful.
Yeah. As long as all 25 are yours, write them off and donate them.
Did you say kidneys?
Yeah.
They're definitely not all hers, man.
Well, I'm not gonna
How
assume.
How do
I
you
think
know?
That
I
might
think
get a
you're
little
seeing
bloody.
something.
Yeah,
Charles
okay.
might get mad at us, and I know Tyra would. So let's not create too much of a mess putting organs in the charity bucket.
Mhm. Mhm.
Now, immersive theater. Going down the line,
One guy.
You're in the right spot. I know that for sure.
what's your first experience with immersive theater, and how did it change your perspective on traditional theater?
So my first experience.
Oh,
with,
and introduce yourselves too.
Oh, yeah. Hi.
Who the heck are you?
That's a great question. My name is Jen Catania. I go by Jen Air Cosplay, Jen Air Photography. There's a lot of Jennifers in nerddoms, so you have to like differentiate. And I've been LARPing for a decade. I did the Star Cruiser a few times. I've done Sleep No More, and I've all kinds of stuff. But I would say my first experience with immersive experiences that really changed the course of my life started when one of my community theater friends and his boyfriend were over, and we were halfway through a pitcher of margaritas, and he said, "Hey, you guys should come try LARPing." And we were halfway through a pitcher of margaritas, and my husband's like, "Yeah," and I'm like, "Yeah." And that was a really badly done LARP. But when it got canceled last minute and we had a dog sitter, we ended up at another game that was incredible. and we started to see how stories a bunch of nerds can tell in the woods can destroy you emotionally, make you laugh, and create friendships that change your life. And one of those LARP friends is who got us to DragonCon in the first place. So
Alan, I think we have an idea for a panel: LARPing with margaritas.
I literally don't think there's another way.
Yes.
and my husband's actually works in the industry and has literally the best margarita recipe ever.
All right, Charles, wherever you are in the ethos, write that one down as 2025. All right, Kevin.
I'll be quick. Hi, I'm Kevin Cafferty. I make documentary films and podcasts. And my intro to immersive theater was in 2009. I saw the Superior Boston production of Sleep No More at the Old Lincoln School, and it completely blew my brain up. I did not know art could do that, and I have been hooked ever since.
All right, got to follow that. Hi, I'm Cash. I'm a composer. I write musical theater, and I've got a show coming out this Halloween. Y'all should all come. So my first introduction to immersive theater is a little bit different. I went in not thinking that theater was something where you have to sit in the audience and be very, very quiet. I thought that you were a part of the story. So little tiny 3-year-old Savannah came to a production of A Christmas Carol, and she was sitting in the aisle, and then the fog rolled in as Scrooge went to sleep. And out from the floor in that aisle right next to little baby Savannah was Marley, the ghost, in all his chains. And little tiny 3-year-old Savannah said, "Holy shit!" Yes. And that's what the audience did. And that's what Marley did. And I felt like I was a part of it. And afterwards, I got lectured by my mother. But I felt so connected to the show. And to me, I had to be taught that traditional theater was the way things are supposed to be. I just went in assuming immersive theater was the way things should be. And I guess that explains why I'm here.
I'm Alon, the Dungeon Meowster. I'm a professional performer for Goblins and Growlers and a bunch of other creative spaces and things, ranging from podcasts to actual play live shows with anime voice actors at anime conventions to stand-up comedy to naked comedy to just comedy in the street I mean, not even comedy. At some point, it just becomes masochistic. And I mean, you know, and so that's me and all the things that I do. And my first kind of foray into, especially like, I guess getting bit by the bug was just actually seeing like street performers as a kid. And especially I grew up in Decatur, so not far from here. Back when everybody called it Dick Hater because it's gay, and it still is, but it's gentrified gay now, which is weird. Point being, as street performers, and I absolutely like was enthralled. And then things started coming out like Stomp and Blue Man Group and things like that. And then I had some really bad, like horribly shitty punk bands for a while. And then that didn't pan out, and I couldn't just keep sleeping on friends' couches, so started performing.
Awesome.
My name's Scott Crampton. I have been running American Immersion Theater and the Murder Mystery Company for about 20 years now. It's kind of my full-time job, immersive theater. I'm opening in Times Square, September 6th. Was on Shark Tank. Got a deal with Blumhouse. And I co-run DCW, which is the Dragon Con wrestling thing. I think my first thing for immersive, I had a cleft palate growing up, and I didn't get picked for a lot of the plays and all the different stuff. So I always just imagined being on it a lot. And I think that kind of imagination of like being part of it and really understanding that the audience is oftentimes imagining themselves up on stage for like a rock concert. And I've always tried to push the envelope with theater until eventually it was just immersive, I guess.
Awesome. All right. Now, one thing I want to say, and I'm saying this both for my panelists and for my audience, we do encourage questions, comments from the panel as well as our audience. That being said, no arguments, please. You may have differences of opinion on what shows are great, what constitutes immersive theater, etc. I will use the lightsaber if I have to. I am fine with disagreement. So feel free to say, well, this is why you're wrong. Just make it in an educational way. That being said, our next question: how do you define immersive theater? And what elements do you think are essential for creating a truly immersive experience? And Meowster, I'm going to pick you first.
Oh gosh. I think when it comes to immersive theater, for I don't think it matters how you define it truly. I think as long as you are, for me, it's like as long as my audience is engaging with it, whatever that audience is, then to me it's immersive. Hopefully that engagement, especially when it comes to performance and improv, is to a level where ideally I lose control of the thing. I would like, that's truly like my favorite ever, is when the thing has taken on a life of its own because of all of the voices that are contributing to the entity, to where it's no longer mine. That's my joy. But I don't think there's that much value in trying to define it. I feel like as long as you're moved, the audience is moved, then it's defined.
All right, Kevin.
I think I'm going to disagree with Alan a little bit. I think immersive is a very popular marketing buzzword now. And I go to a lot of shows that advertise themselves as immersive, and what they actually mean is we arranged the seats in a slightly funky pattern.
Yes.
So for me, I think there are two extremes. On the one, you have sort of like you're sitting and you're watching a proscenium stage, and on the other, you're LARPing. And I think immersive is everything in the middle. And I think the biggest key is that the audience is not passive in that. I think when the audience is passive, then it's more traditional theater. And when you're playing a character, it's LARPing. But when you're an audience member and you are not necessarily actively engaged even in shaping the story, but when you're actively engaged in what you're experiencing, that to me is the sort of immersive theater that I seek out and that I find the most value in.
How about you?
I love those definitions, and I think we had this fight on Discord a little bit before.
This is why I had the warning.
So
There was a seventh panelist originally.
that's where all the kidneys came from.
We don't talk about that.
Yeah.
So I definitely agree with that line of what's not immersive theater. If you're sitting in the audience and you're quiet and you're passive, but then you look at the Globe Theater, where I saw a production of Much Ado About Nothing, where literally if the audience members hadn't hoisted Beatrice up on the stage, like the show would have had to stop. So you can have elements of that immersive aspect, but that's still not immersive theater. LARP, I love the immersion of LARP. The LARP that I staff next weekend, that's not immersive theater, it's immersive. But I would call something where there's a lot more intention to it, and it's more of a show. It's not something more like the Star Cruiser, where it has the script in there. It's a story that's more on the rails, I guess, so to speak. That's kind of where I would start drawing that. That's where I would. The line's vague. There's sand, and we don't like sand. But yeah, I wouldn't call regular LARP immersive theater unless it was very specifically done. And I don't know exactly how, but I don't need to know.
I remember there was a New York Times article around 2011 about the Norwegian LARP scene. They were talking about the stigma around LARP. And one of the people said, well, we're starting to just call it immersive theater because it doesn't have the stigma that LARP does.
Savannah, what do you think?
I am much less experienced in this field than the other folks I'm sitting next to, so I'm very privileged to be on this panel. So my perspective is that everybody is right in their own perspective of what immersive theater is. But to me, it is a sliding scale. On the one end, we have, the traditional theater. You have a stage with people on it, and the audience sitting away from that stage, being very, very quiet unless they are told to clap by an awkward silence, let's say. And then on the other hand, we have that famous quote from the bard himself, "All the world's a stage." And that, I think, is the defining difference between traditional and immersive theater, is how close can we get to reality, to this fiction becoming the real world. And what we're trying to do in immersive theater is push that boundary as far as we possibly can. And whatever you do to do that is immersive theater. doesn't matter whether you call it that or not.
Scott.
So my tagline version on this is that theater is a story about others. Immersive theater is a story about you. But I think the problem is kind of like asking, what is entertainment? And then you start going through 100 different things. You argue like, is painting entertainment and that kind of stuff. So I think the problem that we have right now in immersive is there hasn't been a true handbook that we all suggest. So my general things are there's presentational immersive, which falls on anything of chairs being set weirdly and trickery, and also selfie museum, stuff like that you're kind of interacting with, but is borderline not even immersive or theater. There is voyeuristic, which falls under like a Sleep No More would be the most popular one, where you're not part of the story exactly, but you're like a ghost walking around it. And then true form immersive, which is you have a true hand in the structure of it to some degree, that the story changes somewhat based on yourself.
All right. Any thoughts? All right. I think they want you to talk in the mic.
Hi, I'm Seg of the former Rathskeller Club, lead house manager. Since they took the word immersive away from us, right?
Hey.
To me, like genres are like cooking ingredients. There's an ultimate percentage of how much things are in there. Not to like, I know it's a tricky thing to even do a quantification
Sure.
of it, but it's the way I try to bridge the gap of someone calling immersive and they toss the rose out into the audience, like 1%. Whereas, there's different shows that do different things, and I don't ever want to discourage doing experimental things. And, it gets a little tricky when you start gatekeeping of what immersive is, said the person who said they took the word away from us. But thinking of it as
we're all beautiful contradictions, man.
right.
You can't gatekeep
But
if you
that's
don't know
how
what
I
a
try to
gate
think
is.
of it. Is it's ingredients, and is the dissonance on their advertising that there's 80-100% of this ingredient when really there is 10. And that's kind of how I see immersive. It's an ingredient. It can be a lot of an ingredient or a little bit of an ingredient. Thank you.
Awesome.
Yes, go to the mic.
I'm imagining like origin labels, like wine, and it's got to be from a certain region.
So it sounds like there's a scale of participation in terms of at the least clapping when you're supposed to, and at the most the audience taking a character. So when we talk about immersive, air quotes, co-opted, whatever, is that really what we're trying to draw the line?
I have definitely not clapping when you're supposed to. That does not count as immersive, just so we're on the same page.
That is maybe
And-
interactive, and that can be used interchangeably with immersive a lot.
Yeah, okay.
But I think it's two different things.
Okay,
So-
so but we're, like I said, we're talking about participation in different scales of that. How much is the audience part of the story? And I think somebody said affecting the story as opposed to just being a recipient.
Sure.
Is that kind of what we're talking about?
I think there's affecting the plot of a story, and then there's also affecting what you experience in the story of like, so there's some shows where it's like, I'm going to choose which parts of this story I focus on.
Okay.
So you're more affecting your experience than you're affecting the narrative outcome. But then there are other stories where you're affecting the narrative outcome. And I think that's where the spectrum is.
And I
Okay.
think you can also have where you need someone from the audience to do a certain thing for the story to continue,
Mhm.
even if it's the same thing that happens.
Sure. We'll take.
Ken.
Go ahead.
Oh yeah, I mean, Ken, I think that you can spend a lot of time figuring out like the nuanced definition of immersive, and we'll all sit here and essentially kind of say yes, everything kind of is, and then we'll all just at the end agree that immersive and go wasn't it, and then after that, that will be the only thing we'll all definitely agree on, and then we'll be angry and say they, which we mean by that is immersive and go. They was immersive and go. So just in case that was not translated properly. 100% of all immersive people hate the Van Gogh thing.
Do you have a comment or a question? Okay.
All right, I do have a quick comment. It is okay.
All right. We got time
And
for
Van Gogh thing.
you two, and then I'm going to ask another question. Okay.
No, I wonder if any of you had
Hello, thank you for being here. I wonder if any of you had any interesting stories about the immersive experience just completely falling apart, as if like
You're stealing my
immersive-
questions.
I'm sorry, it was.
Which is immersive thing to do.
Yeah,
It is. Thank
it
you.
is.
No, go ahead.
No, yeah.
Finish your
Of
question.
just too much participation. Back it off. Is there a line? Do you have any stories of it falling apart? Thank you.
I think immersive theater is hard to do well. I've seen a lot of immersive theaters that I don't think were necessarily artistically successful. I'm going to talk about something that fell apart in like a wonderful way, where there was a show I saw in Salem that was designed kind of like a Kobayashi Maru, where any outcome, the audience was supposed to be sad because it was supposed to affect you negatively. And the audience figured out a way to have a happy ending. And it was kind of a feminism-based story set in the 1800s. And it was during the Brett Kavanaugh hearings.
Oh.
And because the audience figured out how to like win the show for women, it was incredibly cathartic to the
Nice.
point where the creators of that show also still talk about like how amazing that one night was.
Nice.
So sometimes breaking the show can result in wonderful things.
Anybody else have anything to add on that?
I have a general overall. So I think everybody wishes, or in their head when they haven't experienced it, almost wishes secretly that it's all going to fall apart and like the audiences are just going to go crazy and you're going to be like, and you, sir, you're a duck, and you're just going to like set yourself on fire immediately or something like that. Like, so it really honestly doesn't happen very often. Almost every fail in immersive theater is the same exact thing. The actors aren't trained very well, and they kind of do. We call it the Michael Jordan rule, and it's basically the goal is that you need to alley-oop people. You can't smash the ball back in their face. So almost every single time that somebody tries to put something in for immersive theater, as an actor, you need to give it back twofold. We all can probably tell you stories of like, I'm a duck. This is me lighting on fire. But it's very, very, it's shockingly uncommon. And most of the times where it goes really badly is when you try to just, strangle the audience with like one real choice, and all the other things were just magician's choices.
I think one other type of failure we need to talk about is not every immersive theater experience is for everyone. It doesn't resonate with everyone. Sometimes you take your spouse to Sleep No More and they leave an hour early and you find them in the bar drinking really expensive tequila. And that's okay that it wasn't. It's okay.
Is that possibly a real story? Did you go through something?
She's making eye
Maybe.
contact
Look,
with Jane right
Maybe. Except
Voyeuristic.
I ended up with Duncan's blood on my mask at the end.
now.
So I was very
I
much
think we're gonna end up with partners'
And
blood.
I do think Sleep No More is designed in such a way where it is entirely possible for an audience member to have a bad show.
look, real immersive theater is done at the bar drinking. That is where.
Sure.
All right.
My name's Melanie. This is my first Dragon Con.
Oh,
So I really just had a comment, my input really. I think the definition of immersive theater is when you become canon.
Oh, and I think I
Yeah,
did
that's
flag
good.
based on her T-shirt.
and you're now canon for Dragon Con.
Nice.
Yeah.
Okay,
I'm in the Sleep No More program, so maybe I'm canon.
We will be getting to that show, by the way, most likely, because I did headhunt somebody for that show. Just I have no idea. But anyway, one of the passion topics that I have as somebody who is disabled, can immersive theater be made accessible to those with disabilities while maintaining the interactive nature of the experience? And have you seen it successfully done?
I can,
Yeah, go ahead.
if you want to start, I mean, you can
Go
I
ahead,
start?
Savannah, and then we'll go here.
Yeah, this is a topic really close to my heart. I actually run a nonprofit that focuses on accessible arts, accessibility in the arts. And I hate that a lot of people can't come to the theater. They can't go to that traditional theater because, they can't fit their wheelchair in the aisle. They can't take an elevator that doesn't exist. They can't, climb those stairs because their knees hurt. They can't hear it, and there's no interpreter. All of these different reasons. There's flashing lights, and a lot of these beautiful historic theaters don't have the means of fixing this, either due to governmental restrictions or whatever else. And immersive theater is uniquely situated such that there's no excuse. You don't have to set up in one of those beautiful traditional theaters. Yeah, those have their place, but immersive theater is the place for anybody to be able to enjoy themselves and become a part of the story. In designing my show that I'm working on right now, I made sure that there are seats available for people who want to take on that traditional audience member role because they're overwhelmed or because they don't really know what to do, or they want to kind of sit back and watch before they decide how they're going to jump in. But then there's also this vast open dance floor. There's seats where you can be right up next to Lord Byron or whoever else. And you can really just choose your own adventure. And there's room for wheelchairs. There is a warning whenever there's going to be a flashing light. There is a guy with a camera, actually like multiple cameras, who is going to film it and put on subtitles and cut out all of the little things that might trigger a seizure and make it accessible to absolutely anybody who wants to view it. Getting translations done, all of that stuff can be done very, very easily in this field where there is no standard. I mean, y'all mentioned that there's no book telling us exactly what to do, which means that we have no excuse to not do all of the things that we can do to make it accessible. And not every show is going to be accessible to every person, but we can make sure that every person is able to access the shows that they care about.
Yes.
All right.
So, starting with Sleep No More, I could not have had the same kind of experience I had if my knee hadn't been in surprisingly good shape. And I went into that experience recognizing that I was likely going to wreck myself for a few days, but I was like, whatever, I was worth it. Because, yeah, they have elevators, but if you're not familiar, you kind of chase after the characters. And at one point, I ran up 5 flights of stairs, and they're narrow and they're dark. And I was in a place where I could do that. If I had to wait for an elevator, it wouldn't have happened. And that's not okay. But we also did Viola's Room in London, which is the more creative, better part of the partnership that did the group that did Sleep No More. And it's a barefoot experience. And I'm like, I sent them an email. I said, hey, if I go barefoot for an hour, my knee will be wrecked. And they got back to me. They gave us our own time slot. I got to wear like my plastic Birkenstocks, and we weren't in it with anyone else because they didn't want me to step on somebody other than my husband. I love him. He didn't want to come to this panel. I wonder why. But hands down, the most accessible, and a big reason why I'm a little bit excited about talking about the Star Cruiser is that I was in a place for my first Star Cruiser experience where I needed a mobility scooter to get from room to room, from floor to floor. I was leaning on my lightsaber cane during experiences, and I didn't miss out on a thing. And as it was scheduled to close, I was a little bit more mobile, and that accessibility piece and knowing I wasn't going to miss out on anything, knowing is because a lot of times immersive theater type things include a food element, knowing they could accommodate my allergies, knowing that in theory the air conditioning worked so I wasn't going to overheat most areas. But also the cast and the crew and the crew members were all in character. They were all so good with that accessibility piece. So like I wrecked my knee during lightsaber training my first voyage because I was really into it. And my second time, I didn't want to push my knee too much. And I said to the Saja, the character who runs lightsaber training, I said, is it okay if I modify the positions a little? If anyone's was a type A kid who always wanted to do exactly what, the teachers said, that was me. And the Saja paused, and he actually remembered me from my first voyage. And he said, some of the greatest Jedi had physical limitations. Modify however you need. And I didn't know, as someone who has struggled with where my body is, I didn't know how much I needed to hear that. But that is that power of immersive theater. That is where it can help you be yourself, but better, and feel better about yourself.
Makes you feel special.
Yeah.
Kevin, what do you think?
A sidebar on Sleep No More. A friend of mine who is confined to a wheelchair saw Sleep No More in Boston several times, and because it was in a school, absolutely adored it because it was incredibly accessible. And then he went to the New York show, and I know we're streaming on DragonCon before 10 p.m. So he said F this S after it. And so I think you're right. The New York version has a lot of accessibility problems, which did not exist in the Boston show, which is why I said Superior Boston Production before. But I'm hoping that, and I loved what you were saying about accessibility. I'm hoping that as this new form expands, that there will be even more considerations there.
Scott,
Um,
as somebody who makes it,
Yeah. Well, I'm not going to take the con for Ocean say it shouldn't be accessible. You crushed it. I mean, most of it is. The majority of it is. Jambusha in China, obviously that's all accessible. Most of the London stuff, Rumble in the Jungle, that's completely accessible. Sleep No More is to some extent. Life and Trust, their newer thing, is much more. But yeah, of course it should be accessible for everybody. Not everything in the world's for every single person in the world. But yeah.
but do you think that it should be acceptable for those of us who may have to use mobility devices or sit down every once in a while to have to miss that immersive experience? Because that's what I find a lot of people, when I was doing my research for this panel, were saying is they're missing out on those interactive immersive experiences because even if they're physically accessible, you can't chase after characters, or the characters don't want to come to you because you're not interacting with them as much as, say, somebody who is able-bodied.
Well, first and foremost, I'm betting a lot of your research is done in America, and America crushes entertainment usually, but we are really, really behind in immersive. Like in London, there's more immersive than there is not immersive. It surpassed the West End. In Broadway, I'm the closest thing right now in immersive, and there's very little. There used to be a ton. Now, the only defense I will say in some of the ones in America is it's just like two people, like some of my favorite people at M3W. They're just like some people, and they're doing it at their house. You know what I'm saying? So like, if you ever run into that, just remember some of these people are just losing thousands of dollars just doing this for fun, and they can't like trick out their personal bedroom, because that's where a lot of the stuff and the best stuff is happening, is just in people's houses or garages or something like that here in America. In London, they're running, $5 million, $10 million budgets. Of course, everything should always be geared for everybody as much as humanly possible to be accessible, and all of my shows that I know of are.
Awesome. And Meowster, what do you think?
Oh, I thought Savannah crushed it.
Yeah.
I don't know what your nonprofit is, but donate to that. That's what I think.
Music of the Two Rivers down in Charleston, South Carolina.
Yeah.
I'm assuming we do not have any streaming questions. Okay, I don't want to miss anybody. That's why I'm asking. All right, we got a line. So,
hi. So my question is, what advice do y'all have for traditional theater spaces, traditional theater artists who want to get into a more immersive experience for the audience?
Scott, I think this one is right up your alley.
Okay. Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, obviously, one of the worst seating for immersive is traditional stadium style seating. You can go with simple things like he was saying back there, which is, once was like, our bar's on stage. Now we're immersive. And you have stuff like that, obviously. My opinions on it in general is that we have all this stupid time. It's called intermission. It's called before the show. I The show for every theater thing in the world starts the second somebody arrives. It's almost unforgivable that there are people here before me, but I made sure to talk to every single person I humanly possibly could. If he's been sitting here for 35, 40 minutes, well, it started for him right now. Doesn't matter if he was early, doesn't matter the situation. So if you want your show immersive, add that in and then use your acts as traditional so that people have structure. People do like structure and entertainment, but have your actors maneuver around. There is a couple small examples in America of this on a public scale, which would be The Play That Goes Wrong. The touring one, they will do things like walk around and they'll be out there with the audience and stuff like that. But I'm not good at short answers. I apologize. I can tell you the time that I realized the most of how important this is was I saw The Boy from Oz with Hugh Jackman, and we were there for WrestleMania, so we thought, oh, he's Wolverine. He was not Wolverine in that, just to clarify. I very far away from Wolverine, but it was the Broadway Charity Cares thing, right? And he came out and he interacted with the audience for a solid 30 minutes. And then when the second act started, everybody got up and went to the bathroom. But that's the big thing. You can give those important special moments to people by having them take tickets in character, having them do stuff in character, having them just talk around to the audience in character. Why do they have to live backstage? They can get in costume a little earlier.
So I want to ask Savannah this as well, since you're making a show. But that being said, I have one question. Scott, since you've been working in Times Square, what about what Cabaret is doing for their pre-show?
I love that. I haven't seen Cabaret. I'm so sorry. But
I was just curious.
My daughter did, and
she
thought it was, that's great. They're trying. They're beginning to actually try, and that is awesome.
Okay. Savannah.
Well, he covered all of the things that are things that I'm like, oh yeah, I need to write that down. But for me, I come from the world of opera and classical music and all that. And for us, the concert begins, like he said, when the audience comes in, but not even then. It begins when we start to learn the music. And this is true for any kind of concert, any piece you play. That performance begins the second you pick up the sheet music and you start looking at it. And that needs to be the approach from the beginning. You can't say, okay, how can we make this show immersive? At the start of the rehearsal, you've got to go, okay, we want to bring the audience in. How do we do that? What can we do from this moment to go ahead and make this into that kind of experience? Don't go in adding stuff. Start with it. And that sort of change in your mindset will completely change your approach and make it so easy to incorporate those elements, where adding them will feel like you're just adding more work. It actually feels like less work when you do it properly, because you're letting the audience do some of the work for you, and some of those hard and fast lines that make theater so nerve-wracking are just removed, and it's great. So hope that makes sense.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I do really want to say real quick, I know I'm from the improv side of things, but I'm always on stupid time is what that means. And then the reality of that is that for a lot of my performances and things that I do partner with local small businesses and use their space. And if you're trying to get your, out of a traditional theater space so that you can kind of subvert some of the ways that you're kind of creating, highly recommend just change the space you're in. And it doesn't have to be official. I've done so many, not even just music shows, but performances under a bridge, like inside tunnels, like you don't even need to get clearance. You probably should legally, but if you don't get caught, then whatever.
And that being said, one of our good friends in the audience here, Greg Bell, literally did a panel presentation on adapting spaces for makers this year. So, and I think you recorded it, didn't you, Greg? Yeah, so it's going to be online. So totally check that one out as well.
Yeah, highly recommend.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, stop me if this is not a helpful addition. Just on the
There
topic,
are no bad questions or comments.
On the topic of accessibility in immersive theater, my college runs an immersive theater puzzle game, and I played for a year, and then I helped plan for 3 years, which means I, planned, stage managed, acted, writing, everything. And that was a really big part of our discussion. Yeah, stage managers. Yeah. That was a really big part of our discussion and our planning process for that game, because we had a lot of disabled players and we had a couple of disabled planners and actors, and we had to account for that backstage as well. And just some of the things that we did, like, I think proves that you can be accessible even on a budget, even when you're small. Like, we did like separate performance times for, like, we had an event where people were supposed to like go across campus to find where the different scenes were happening. And we just did a certain performance time for disabled players where it was all in one building and they could walk room to room, or like, uploaded videos with transcriptions after every event. Like, obviously facilitated communication between players and actors and everyone about what was okay and what they needed help with. And of course, this is not to say that we were perfect. There's always problems, and you can never predict what needs people will have, but yeah, it's doable. It's doable if you communicate.
I'm sorry, all I'm hearing is the Dalek next door.
I'm glad you hear it too. I was getting a little worried.
I'm hearing you.
Yeah, I'm hearing you too. But
I'm hearing you too.
This is an
I'm just
immersive
saying, if I'm
Dr.
laughing, it's because I'm hearing the Dalek.
It's
No.
an immersive Doctor Who panel.
Oh, great.
Yeah.
Cool.
Don't blink. But also, I love that you're mentioning other aspects of accessibility other than just mobility, because there's all kinds of other things. If you find out someone who's participating just had a concussion, there's a whole bunch of things. There's so many areas for accessibility. And I think sometimes we, as creators, start to get a little too confident and we think, oh, we figured it out. But if you've met one person with accessibility needs, you've met literally one person, and everyone has unique needs that can vary from moment to moment.
Definitely. Okay. Go ahead. We got time for a few more questions. We're almost at time.
Hello again, Seg, formerly Rat Scully Club. First of all, clearly this is a panel on its own, just judging by this line.
Hey, I'd love to do it again.
And I'd love to join you on it.
Yeah.
I know this is comment, but this is working with over 50 productions and immersive of various scales. With Ratskeller, we were of the approach of we keep secrets for people, not from them, which can be problematic if we pull that thread too far. But if at the end of the performance, that person doesn't feel we have hoodwinked them in one way or another, as in we informed what they needed to inform people at the front end and to accommodate them to feel like whatever their abilities are through the process, that makes for a better show. Even with when you make accommodations, it's not the accessibility route, it's just tunnel 3. It's just another thing. And sorry for being commenting on the thing.
No. I said I want to comment.
I had to pick one thing out of the entire decades long
Well,
work,
it could be a book.
right?
I mean,
Which I need to write, I know. But thank you.
Hi there. So the interactivity of the theater has existed since the history of the theater, from the Greek era to the Groundling, the editorial commentary of the Groundlings, to right up to, I'm remembering a horrible audition for Tony and Tina's Italian Wedding in '94.
That was great.
Yes.
I love that.
So my question to the panel is, it does seem like it's picking up in popularity and it's becoming more mainstream. Do you have theories as to why?
Again, stealing my questions.
That's a good one. That's a good question. Good job.
All right. I'm going to pick on Kevin first.
Sure. I think nothing exists in a vacuum and everything exists on a continuum. And you're right. There have been elements of this throughout history. There was a show in the 90s in New York that had a lot of sort of you're following different characters and you're choosing which paths you play. And I think what has changed is people weren't calling Tony and Tina's Italian Wedding immersive theater at the time. So part of it is branding. Part of it is, especially in England in the 2000s, like you said, it was picking up then, and they wanted to name this theater that was gaining in popularity. And I think that immersive theater is what stuck. And I think, as with most things like that, you talk to a group like Punch Drunk and they're like, we're not immersive theater. But I think that's what everyone sort of says. And I think it's more popular partly because People are used to playing video games, and they're used to kind of looking around in their headsets like that. I think because everyone's on their phones all the time or looking at a screen, going to somewhere where you're like forced to be more present and in the moment and have a different type of experience is of more value to people now. So I think it's experience. I think it's things like that.
Go ahead.
I really want to say it's because, and longer answer, but it's because Scott and Savannah are writing these, and I'm not meaning them as individuals specifically, but
just us.
I do also
it
mean
all
that,
rides us first thing.
Hey, on top day.
Get out of here, they. And I mean that in because, like, I'm a big labor advocate. Lots of union stuff. Yes, absolutely. Join your local union. Share your salaries. All that jazz. Truly, though, it's a good thing. And the reason a lot of theater and a lot of this stuff was not accessible to people who come from blue collar and working class backgrounds. And more and more, we're eroding away at that those barriers to entry. And a lot of that comes from people sharing knowledge, and a lot of that comes from people being interested in continuing to grow and then sharing that amongst themselves. And lowering that barrier to entry is everything. So I think that especially as more voices come in that aren't just aristocratic and white and male, and all these barriers come down, then we have things for everybody instead of just for a very specific few.
I'm very passionate on this answer, if I could just.
Yeah, go ahead.
I believe we have a supply and demand thing, right? True facts, we still have the same amount of time that we had forever, right? For the most part, arguably even less because we work more, right? We now have all of the world's information right here on our phones. And that means we are watching more than ever. Statistically, we absolutely are. However, there's a human need to actually connect, to actually do something. I think if you want to really see it to evolve, look at what's happening in China right now. The number 3 form of entertainment, the number 3 reason for people to leave their house is Jambusha, which means that immersive theater in China is how people connect. Their version of Tinder will commonly say hookups no, Jambusha yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
You had something to add?
Me, just one sentence. In a world of decreased agency and increased informational accessibility, we crave connection, and entertainment is the number one way we find that.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thanks.
And I am gonna cut off audience questions for this after this line because we're gonna run out of time. But go ahead.
I have a disability a lot of people don't think of. I am mentally disabled, and I function differently on different days. And
Sure.
a lot of the time when I go to shows like that, I feel like I'm tossed aside because sometimes I need someone to hold my hand to get into it, and it feels very othering and very different, and it has been getting better, but it's still something that needs desperate work on. And I have been saying, like, they'll give you a warning of what is in the show beforehand, but there's still very little of things that I can actually participate in.
I believe the Star Cruiser addressed a lot of that, didn't it?
Yeah. The so from the second you checked in, the blue crew, the people in the blue coats who all had their name tags that said what planet they were from, they were the people who were checking you in. They were the people who were serving you meals. And every single one of them, if you were someone who was having any sort of issue, they would move planets to make sure you got what you needed. And there were a lot, because there were so many different characters in different roles, and each of those characters had a different personality and a different focus. They would keep an eye out, and they were brilliant at looking to see if somebody was maybe hanging back a little bit, if somebody was maybe having a rough time. And there were certain characters, especially the Saja, who didn't use the Force, but they were kind of the ones who studied the Force and the Jedi. And they were really not notorious, because that's like a bad way, but they were renowned for having these profound conversations in the moment with someone who was maybe having a really intense feeling, somebody who was just curious, someone who was just sitting aside. But also there were There were characters like the droid SK who you could just sit and talk and they beeped. And if you decided you understood what they were saying, you would have that. But that was a situation where the staffing levels were so high and all of the staff was so incredibly well trained and so well trained in that accessibility and so excited to be there that I think it's very rare to see that when you have that many people so prepared to keep an eye out for the passengers.
What's concerning to me about the Star Cruiser being the gold standard for this, though, is that the Star Cruiser seems to be accessible in every area but price.
And that's a huge problem.
That is a huge
because-
problem.
And availability, since it doesn't exist.
Okay.
And
I didn't put this out, and so this is my fault. We're gonna avoid using the word failed when it comes to the Star Cruiser because, as far as I am concerned, it is not a failed experience. If people like it, it does not mean that it was successful.
Oh, I didn't say
mean-
it failed. I just said it's not accessible because it doesn't.
Okay,
exist.
I could have sworn you
I
said
did
failed.
not.
I said it-
Anybody
I
hear me
said it
say
was
I did not say
expensive.
it, right?
No,
I think it was
that's fine.
I thought
I
it was
just
a
wanted-
glorious masterpiece, and I was really bummed that I didn't get to see it.
No, that's fine. It did definitely. I wanted to put it out there because we had an argument on our group about it, so that's why.
And with that accessibility piece, I think the price of accessibility in general in life is ridiculous. It is ridiculous how much it costs to keep yourself functioning. And I'm in 100% agreement. We need more experiences with that level of accessibility that are also financially accessible.
Yes.
Yeah,
It's-
like-
and I don't know what the solution there is. I'm not smart enough, but
No, you are very smart. Kevin.
And again, there's regular LARPs are at a different level, but I have seen a lot of non-for-profit, just a bunch of people working together get towards that level of accessibility. But it's a different type of experience. But I've seen that especially in one-shot LARPs.
Mhm.
But it's still not that accessible, but it's financially accessible.
my hope
Okay.
is that the learnings from the Star Cruiser can be used by both Disney and other companies to create these experiences for you.
All right, we got 7.
Thank you.
I'm sorry for your experiences, but I hope it just keeps getting better. More
Well,
people
Yeah,
are
that's
talking
what I
about
was gonna say.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
And then this panel.
Hey, so
Yes,
See?
it is.
You have a memory of something that happened to you.
Or you might have lost that memory when it happened.
See? Memories.
so I am a not one shot LARPer, but we do events once a month kind of thing. That's not really the question I'm about, but just on the fact of it is sort of the immersive theater of that. My question that I've got is on the fact of I'm also a scare actor here at Netherworld, which is like local.
Again, stealing my questions.
Are you a scare actor?
Yes. Oh, that was
You
good.
all can be a scare actor.
Yeah. So Netherworld is a very like maze style, so it's not immersive at all. But there are now haunts coming out that are considered extreme haunts, where you get smaller groups of people coming in or single people coming in. There's like Miasma, which is single people. There's Crucible, which is multiple people. What experiences do y'all have as far as not wide scale? And I'm not even talking specifically in haunt, like, because that's a hot topic for a lot of people because it could get into like mental torture and stuff like that. That's not what I'm talking about. But on the fact of like bringing in smaller groups and not being like, hundreds of people large, but like specifically maybe focusing on one person in an experience or like a group of 5 that come in that you are writing a story specifically for them to experience.
I want us to answer this because it's a very good question, but I also want to add: do you think things like what he's
Do
describing,
you think things like Crucible and Miasma and all
That-
those that are the mental,
as well as things like, and I know what your answer is going to be, Scott, murder mystery, for example,
Yes.
are immersive theater? And keep it short because we got 2 more questions and we only got 5 minutes. Go ahead, Scott.
Oh, like what? I'm not sure if I fully understand your question. Are you asking, is there other? Yeah, there are so many people. Yeah, there's so many people. I can tell you that from my now new experience in the horror genre with working with the studios, they're not very interested in doing the small form, which is fair because it's very hard to financially figure out how they make money. But there is a tremendous amount of them. You can find a lot of them through Reddits, and you can find a lot of them on No Proscenium. But they're amazing, and people are doing them all the time. They were doing a lot more in America before COVID, which I was kind of sad because they're not doing them as much, like in New York and such. But they're amazing, and people should do them. You should do one. Just pick people and then just do something for your friends. It's great.
So we were starting to talk about one in the Discord. There's one that is usually sometimes in New York City, but it came to the Boston area called Undersigned. And what's really exciting about it is, you're not, what happens is in it, you're not actually supposed to talk about, but you
So no
try to be
spoilers.
fast. No, yeah, I know. So no spoilers, but also it's really no spoilers. But you sign up, and it's one of those things where from the beginning, the person who greets you, you think is just the greeter, but they're actually part of it. And you have to choose an object you take into this room. You have to be blindfolded, and you have this conversation. And it blew my mind. And I was supposed to write a review or something, but I just can't because I still haven't processed it. But it was two performers and one person, and it didn't last that long. I have no idea about the economic feasibility or how it works.
Very challenging.
But it was in an Odd Fellows club, or Odd Fellows Lodge. So it was in a space that was less expensive. But it absolutely blew my mind. And it is, I hope people do more things like that.
There's literally thousands. Yeah. I cannot stress enough. There's literally Claws right now. It's a one-on-one phone experience. Brilliant. It's called Claws. You can buy tickets right now.
All right. Quickly.
Hi. I work at Dad's Garage here in Atlanta. We're in improv theater, and we're doing our
just did a panel with
amazing.
Magd. Yep, I know. Very
So
well.
we're doing our first little toe into immersive next summer. My role was basically pushing all the immersive elements, and wondering if you've got any thoughts on either how to effectively start the immersion before the show, in like marketing sense, or if you've had successes with things like that, and or if you just have massive pitfalls to avoid, like your worst experiences when you were first getting started with things.
Short and either or. Pick one.
Street art.
Street art. Okay.
Okay.
For sure.
Savannah.
I've been putting up advertisements for my show. It's about the summer Mary Shelley wrote Frankenstein. For Mary and Percy Shelley's wedding, a birth announcement for Mary's baby. Lord Byron's looking for a personal physician, and the QR code to like RSVP or send in a job application leads you to the musical show.
Like literally slopping up posters. QR
Yeah.
Look into some ARG stuff maybe, and creating something interactive leading up to the show.
Scott, do you have any?
Emails. We do email campaigns that work through what you're going to and that kind of stuff. I think those can be very powerful. Brent Easton Ellis actually did an amazing one for American Psycho 2 Unofficial.
Okay. How about you? Do you have any advice?
I mean, I'm mostly, for this sort of thing, I'm mostly on the audience side, but word of mouth among people, like have people talk to people.
All right.
Cool. Thank you.
We got 2 minutes, but I want to take this question.
Right. So it's immersive is like often very seen as very modern avant-garde sort of things. I was wondering if there's like a deep history of like historical examples. I know a couple from like the 20th century were brought up earlier, but if there's like a deep lineage or history in theater and everything with immersive theater.
Scott, do you know?
Sure, yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's tons. Remember that theater back in the day was viewed for, and I apologize for the term, the common masses, but that was kind of the term they used. And that allowed them, there was much, it wasn't like, shh, everybody shut up. It was very much about people talking and yelling, and if the show wasn't good, they'd be throwing things. They were all on the floor. It was like a Green Day concert, but like Shakespeare. And so that in a sense was very immersive. But remember that people weren't nuanced to finding the entertainment. They're just like, oh my God, this one time 30 years ago, Grandma saw a show. And that was the totality of the amount of shows that Grandma ever saw. So like they weren't doing this subtle nuanced stuff in the 1600s, as much. But overall, every show was interactive because there wasn't like a shut up button for people, so they're just like, boo, I don't like this. And
All
they throw
right.
things.
We are at time. I want to briefly give my panelists a chance on where to tell us where we can find you, what else you're doing at Dragon Con. Make it snappy.
ScottCrampton.com or the Murder Mystery Company or Princess Parties. I have a bunch of things. Come talk to me. Dragon Con Wrestling.
I'm the Dungeon Meowster. That's where you can find me trapping and neutering cats, mostly not neutering on camera, as well as lots of like weird punk shows. If you're in Richmond, hit it up. Otherwise, I'm with Goblins and Growlers for almost all my creative stuff, and then other bits here and there. And at Dragon Con, I am drinking for the rest.
Sounds good. That's what I'm going to be doing after this panel. Go ahead, Savannah.
My website is composer.cash, and you can find pretty much everything I do there. I have a show coming out this Halloween called Phantasmagoriana about the summer Mary Shelley wrote Frankenstein. Y'all should all come. It's going to be a blast. All you can drink wine all night, ballroom dancing, Frankenstein, vampires. You get to tell Lord Byron he's an asshole. It's great. I'm also working on writing a new show, which I'm documenting the process of writing it in a YouTube series. You can find me on YouTube and Patreon as Cash the Composer, or just Cash Composer, because who uses articles anymore? And at Dragon Con, I will be at the Temporal Formal tonight because my boyfriend and I took up ballroom dancing, and we like to think we're good at it. As for tomorrow, I will be hungover.
Gleamingthetube.net is where you can find my podcast that attempts to chronicle every movie that contains a skateboard in it. It also has a link to my other podcast, The Best Stuff in the World, where we talk about the best stuff in the world, including immersive theater. And my episode where I interview original Sleep No More cast member Kelly Bartnick is my most downloaded episode by a goddamn mile. This is the last of my 13 programming items at Dragon Con 2024, so I'm getting a Mai Tai right after this.
All right. And I just want to say, if you're talking about the best stuff in the world, you need to do an episode about Rent. Anyway, go ahead.
Jen Eyre, JENEYRE cosplay, or JENEYRE photography on Instagram. Mostly I post my photography and costumes and cosplay, but Tales of Valor LARP is up in Massachusetts. My husband cooks. It's amazing. If you've ever thought about trying regular nerdy run around in the woods LARP, just try it. It's fun.
Yeah.
Your friends might make you cry. You'll love it.
All right. So for me, where you can find me, Dragon Con Theater and Performing Arts Lovers Unofficial. I am the stage manager and founder of that group. We are wanting more Dragon Con to embrace more theater programming. This panel is an example of the kind of programming that I would love to see at Dragon Con. Yes, I love to talk about musicals all day, every day. Everybody loves a good sing-along. But the fact of the matter is this is the kind of stuff that we nerd out about. So if you want to see more panels like this at Dragon Con, please make sure you rate the panel. I'm not going to tell you how many to rate, but make sure you rate it. And also comment on the the little comment
See,
section.
that's interactive. See, we got you involved.
Comment section that you want more theater at Dragon Con. You can say it however you want, as long as it is nice. And I just want to really thank this track. Charles took a really big chance on my group specifically. He had no idea who I was, what I did. I have never seen a track more welcoming of new people, new ideas. And so I want to applaud this track in particular for doing that and going out of their way to accommodate me on two different types of panels. As far as what else the group has, we have the musicals and plays of fantasy literature Monday at 10 a.m. at the Hyatt Regency Atlanta. And then From History to Stage, 80 years of Rodgers and Hammerstein, Monday at 11:30 in the Cortland Grand. We do YouTube and digital panels at least 2 a month, sometimes more. Sometimes you'll even find us on the digital media stuff when they do start doing takeovers. So keep an eye out. And if you're interested, Dragon Con Theater and Performing Arts Lovers Unofficial.
Hey,
And thank you guys for coming out.
Thank you.
8:30 on the Sunday of Dragon Con. So many awesome questions, so many awesome comments. You've been like one of the best audiences I've ever.
Thank
been on the
you.
panel.
This was my first panel ever. Thank you guys.
This has been,
My first too.
this has been so awesome.
oh my God, the two most qualified to be here, their first panel both. No,
That was the
hey,
least cool.
one other thing, remember, if you coordinate with those comments, you can make it an immersive theater for whoever's reading them on the other end.
Oh.
So,
Yes.
yeah,
Yeah,
like,
give them the
make it
entire
happen.
B movie script
weird.
across all of your comments. Like,